And we are live.
Fantastic. All right. ADFR.
Yep. So this is our regulation covering our district wellness committee. It's been a number of years. This was up for 5-year review. And so there were a number of sections in here that we were just cleaning up to better align with what our actual practice is or align with what we are statutorily required to do. There were some things in here where we left some things in the gray and so cleared some pieces up.
I only had one question. That was under the 8 of 8. Go to page 8 of 8. I thought it was isn't this ADFR? Yeah.
ADFR, yep.
Yeah.
And this is one, there was a little bit of a section that Tom just added in this morning. I believe that was from the MSBA recommendation. So there was, but it's about the federal school lunch program was really it.
The only question, the one that I had the question on is why did we cut out the bit about we could identify at least one other assessment tool? We didn't want to have another assessment tool?
So the issue was we didn't want to, in the regulation, bind us to a specific tool because when we were looking at it, tools weren't getting updated that often and didn't fit. Part of our challenge now is that it's just our special education buildings that we're providing lunch for within our program. And so we were looking for what's an instrument that makes sense. And we didn't want to anchor us to one specific instrument or tool, that we were just looking at a locally created tool that fits with our population.
Okay, the way I read that though was it wasn't identifying one other assessment tool. It just kind of said, yeah, we'll have one other one.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm reading that wrong.
So, so how it reads now is the program coordinators will measure overall effectiveness of the local wellness program, and the assessment tools will be locally created.
Okay.
And so the reason we wanted it to be written that way was we still are going to look at the CDC tool, but it's going to require some tweaking to make it fit with our student population.
Okay. All right, that's fine with me. Unless anybody else has anything.
What was the significance of the sort of green highlighting with one of the earlier paragraphs? I wasn't used to seeing that.
That was the MSBA language that was brought over this morning.
I didn't see that last night. That just came in?
Yeah,
Okay.
that just came in. It's just about food procurement.
Okay.
And it's just aligning that with the National School Lunch Act.
Thank you.
I can take this one. The board should be very familiar with it.
Yes.
We talked about the summer summit and the voting that will take place. Even though MSBA said it's fine for you just to email us your alternates, we thought it best to also bring it in front of the policy committee to memorialize it in our policy and in our regulation.
That makes sense.
Sounded good to me.
Mm-hmm.
So there we go. Okay.
I'm sorry, I had a quick question about the BCCA. So the policy, not the regulation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just to clarify there, I understand now we can have up to 3 delegates. So we're going to solicit 2 volunteers. And if those volunteers are not available, then we'll then appoint up to 3 board members to serve as delegates.
Correct.
Is it 2? And if the 2 are not available, then we get 3?
So what I found is that a district of our size can actually have 3 votes.
Okay. So should it say the Board of Education shall solicit 3 volunteers? In the first sentence there?
Yeah, to have that match.
Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. This one was just one really minor edit where we added the word itemized.
And tablets and computers.
And tablets. And we took away VCRs. You're
We
right.
take-
Forgot it.
Yeah, we ain't buying VCRs.
If someone's trying to use petty cash to buy a VCR, I would love to know where they're shopping. So then these are for JHCD, these are 3 new regulations. This is to better align with MSBA, and so that's why these are all new. So that's why there isn't anything redlined in these. But it's to have a regulation on file. One covers our screening and referral process, another one specifically around lice, another one specifically around seizure. So these were ones recommended by MSBA. So we made some local edits to what MSBA was recommending, but overall, this is word for word with what MSBA has reflected.
I had a question about this one before we wrap it up
Mhm.
here. I'm always curious if so just a clarification on number 1, the last sentence there. There's oh, I'm so sorry. It's the next one. I apologize. Not this one.
Okay.
It was a different one that I had a question about.
So then head lice, which this one we really tried to work through what is actually our practice and the sequencing with this. So those were some of the things we had to edit here on the local level.
So my question about this one, about number 1, clarifying, the other students who are going to get checked are the ones who reside in the same home as the infected students.
Correct.
And is there any option or including something in the policy or regulation about informing other students in the school that there are head lice so that parents can check and be aware?
So it really, we went back and forth on that about what that level of communication would look like. And so we didn't want to put it in the regulation, but what our practice has been is that we communicate to the most local level. So if it's a student who's in one classroom and in that one classroom all day, then we would communicate to just that classroom because it's not something that we need to put the entire school on alert for. And in our SSD schools, that's often the case where the student is just in one fairly tight-knit community for the day. But if it's a student who's moving around in more spaces, then we might send a different communication. So we didn't want to put it in the regulation, but that is a piece of our process, is the notification process, depending on what the circumstance is. So we didn't want to force our hand of how our principals communicate from a situation to situation.
Is there any risk to the principals if they do communicate, if it's not part of the regulation
There's
in
not.
terms of what information to communicate? Okay.
Only thing I have on this is just the formatting. There's not a space between 6 and 7.
Yep, I see that. Thank you.
Oh, same thing for the last one. We're doing that.
And then seizure and epilepsy is the next one, which this one is based off legislation. And so this is pretty much verbatim what's in statute.
That's the law, isn't it? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
JOR, this is a new regulation that we did not have before. So when we were doing a review of policy, this is one that's been a sticky one that's come up. This is JOR, which is student records, and within that we've added a section about electronic communications as a student record. So if you want to scroll down, Tom. Right there. Yep. So emails, text, and electronic communications as educational records. So this has become more and more common where we're getting requests for these types of communications. So we wanted to better spell out how these fit within the student record.
Well, are these considered part of educational records, or can they be, if you do a Freedom of Information Act, they get emails? Which one is this?
So this is if it's a FERPA request is what this
Okay.
is trying to
All right.
address. And,
Okay.
and that's why you've kind of got the 2 sections here explaining when is it an educational record and when is it not an educational record.
But they
So
could still
this is-
point, right?
Mhm.
They could still do the Freedom of Information
They
Act.
can still do a Freedom of Information request, but this is for a FERPA request.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that was what I had on 6th and 7th. But
Mhm.
yeah, you answered my question there.
Mhm. Right. And then the last one, we did not put edited policies in this one, but just wanted to put it on the board policy committee radar, that we're taking a look at GCBDA and GDBDA. So the professional staff leaves as well as the support staff leaves. As we're moving into next school year, where we're going to be working through our joint resolutions as well. So there's a number of areas that we're looking at within our policy, because they've been in implementation now for 2 years. So we're looking at some areas like bereavement or care ATC leave and a couple other places within here of, do we need to make some edits or adjustments? Kind of aligns with some of the other work that the board's doing in this space. So just wanted to make board policy committee aware that when we meet in June, we'll likely be bringing some edits to GCBDA and GDBDA that aligns with some broader work. Dr. Macklin, or I don't know if Katina Lyles is on, if Dr. Lyles is on, but if either of you have anything else additional you want to add on this one?
Yeah, I just think, at the end of the day, we're going to be, as a board doing some work just regarding all aspects of the, of language and what those pieces really mean. And so, we want to be able to just incorporate all these pieces. And so we're going to take a look at some of these aspects when we have our retreat.
Do we need to look at this as it relates to the JR?
Well, that's what
completely,
yeah.
isn't it?
When I say when we have our retreat, those are going to be the pieces that we're going to be taking a look at as we're really preparing for negotiations of next steps.
Yeah, but then at the same time, these two do also govern our folks who are not governed by a joint resolution. So people like our miscellaneous business personnel and our administrators, where it's solely the policy that dictates what these look like for them. So kind of have to look at that in tandem.
Okay.
And then one other plug, as we move into this continued cycle for policy revision, working with Tom and Dr. Macklin, where we are working through a revision cycle to take a look at all of our policies. So when we get into starting in June and then moving forward, we're going to be pulling letter by letter of our policies to clean up and making sure that everything that is in those policies aligns with our practices and that we have the right titles and those types of things. We've had a lot of change in personnel, org chart, and those types of things. And so meeting by meeting, you will see a bank of policies, potentially all in the same letter group, where I think in June, we're looking at the A's and the B's, and then we're moving on to the D's in August. Thank you, Tom. So this is kind of what we have mapped out. And so you will potentially see a higher volume of policies that we're looking at. But for most part, the edits are going to be pretty narrow. It's just around making sure that what's listed in the policy or the regulation matches what the district practice is. And so by starting this in June with the A's, by the time we get to the end of the school year in 2026, we will have made it all the way through the board policy alphabet.
And again, what Kevin's point is, I think, and I think just from analyzing this, that our policies are pretty much aligned because the policies are written in a way to avoid litigation and be aligned with the district's practice. Where you see the inconsistencies is in the regulation. And so being able to analyze the regulation and see what is really the current practice, is it practice? And then also, how many policies do we have that may not be applicable anymore? These are all questions that we need to delve into from that standpoint.
Yeah, there also is potentially some opportunity for merger, where we'll be able to take some things and pull them together into one. And we've done some of that over the last couple of years, but there's more opportunity for merger.
Okay.
And that was all we had on the agenda for today.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
All right.
Hey, Kevin, can you stay on?
I sure can.
I'm gonna make you host then,
Okay.
so that we don't.
Are we still streaming?
Are we still live? Yeah, we are. You know what?